When should landlords use a lease amendment for their property? Imagine you have a tenant who has been reliable for years, but now needs a slight change in their rental agreement. Do you just rewrite the whole lease? Not necessarily. Sometimes, a simple document called a lease amendment is all you need. It is a formal way to change specific parts of an existing lease without starting from scratch. This makes managing rental properties smoother and keeps everything clear for both sides. A lease amendment is used when both the landlord and tenant agree to modify certain terms. For example, if the rent needs to go up because of rising property taxes or expenses, a lease amendment can document that change. If the tenant wants to stay longer or leave earlier, an amendment can adjust the lease dates. When a tenant adds a roommate or family member, an amendment updates who is responsible for the rent and property. Pet policies are another common reason to use a lease amendment. If a tenant wants to get a dog or cat after signing the original lease, an amendment can include rules about pet deposits, size limits, or restrictions. If the tenant plans to sublet part of the property, an amendment can specify the conditions for subletting. Sometimes, tenants face financial hardships and agree to a new payment plan, which should be documented with an amendment. Changes to how the property is used or maintained also call for a lease amendment. For example, if the tenant wants to convert a part of the property into a home office or workshop, the amendment clarifies what is allowed. Likewise, if responsibilities for repairs shift between the landlord and tenant, an amendment records those new responsibilities. The process for creating a lease amendment is straightforward. First, either the landlord or tenant suggests the change. Then, both review and negotiate the details. Once they agree, the changes are written into a formal document that clearly states what is being modified. All parties must sign the amendment to make it legally binding. The changes take effect on the date specified in the document. Using lease amendments helps landlords respond to tenant needs and changing circumstances without the hassle of drafting a new lease. For example, if a tenant loses their job and requests a temporary rent reduction, an amendment can formalize that agreement while protecting the landlord's interests. However, not every small change needs an amendment. Minor updates like clarifying trash disposal rules can be handled with a lease addendum, which is a separate document attached to the original lease. Major changes, especially those involving who is on the lease or the core rent amount, should always be handled with a lease amendment. Key points for landlords include always putting changes in writing and having all parties sign the document. Keep copies for your records. Remember that in some places tenants might not be legally required to agree to amendments, so good communication is essential. Use amendments for significant adjustments and reserve addendums for smaller updates or additional rules. In property management, lease amendments are a useful tool to keep agreements current and flexible. They help maintain good relationships with tenants and ensure that all changes are documented properly, making your rental operations run more smoothly.